Hello, I'm Orkhan Amashov. Welcome to Context. On the eve of UK Prime Minister Sir Keir Starmer's crucial visit to meet US President Donald Trump, one of the questions asked is if Britain can now save what is known as a special relationship at a time when large gaps are ostensibly opening between Washington and London on the reality of Ukraine's plight. The US and Britain at this stage do not appear to act in harmony, at any rate at the United Nations. This week, on two separate occasions, the US sided with Russia at this forum. Firstly, the US opposed a European drafted resolution condemning Moscow's actions and espousing Ukraine's territorial integrity at the UN General Assembly. Secondly, the US drafted and voted for a resolution at the UN Security Council which called for a swift end to the conflict without any criticism of Russia, with this resolution being passed with Britain, the key US ally, abstaining together with France after their attempts to amend the wording had been vetoed. But the UN votes do not form the whole reality. The special relationship between these two countries is too deeply embedded and important to be brushed away at a moment's notice, with many still believing that Britain has a consequential role to play on Ukraine. I'm now joined by Vlad Alteanu, political analyst, senior counsel at EU Law and Policy, based in Brussels, Belgium. Vlad, great to see you.
You too.
Vlad, how important is this prospective meeting between Prime Minister Starmer and President Trump as a reality check for the special relationship? What we have seen at the UN was not particularly encouraging in this respect. What is your thought on that?
Yeah, it is absolutely not encouraging to see, and I think in the whole history of the United Nations, such an alignment was not happening. So, in other words, a resolution in which France and the UK, both as members of the Security Council, would would abstain in that case, on a resolution that the United States initiated and voted together with Russia, is something not seen. In the General Assembly, it's also extremely interesting to see the number of the countries, because the resolution passed with a number of countries which basically approved it, but also with a abstention on the side of France and the UK, which is also very worrisome. So it's a first. It is clearly a first. It is very important to try to, as the French expression goes, sauver les meubles, so save what is possible to be saved in that relation. And indeed, the relation is very deep. It goes for many, many decades, in both the case of France and the case of the United Kingdom. I think President Trump, during the visit of President Macron of France, very recent visit of President Macron, President Trump said that France is the oldest ally of the United States. Only that, in fact, while they were discussing in the White House about that, the resolutions were discussed and voted in the Security Council, respectively, the General Assembly of the United Nations. So, in fact, it looks like there is a breach in that relation. In words and in actions, let's see. President Macron just went to Washington. Prime Minister Starmer is going to Washington as we are speaking. So there will be probably many developments over the next few days. There is definitely an informal discussion with the EU leaders foreseen. There is a formal one on the 6th of March, and there is another meeting in the UK discussing European, EU plus, that is, defense, probably going to happen this Sunday.
Well, definitely, of course, Britain could not have been the oldest US ally by definition, bearing in mind the circumstance in light of which the United States actually emerged. And back to the prospective meeting between the British Prime Minister and US President. Prime Minister Sir Keir Starmer recently stated that Donald Trump had changed the global conversation on Ukraine 3 years on from the beginning of the war. And he also suggested that Trump had created an opportunity to end the war. How will Britain, in the person of the Prime Minister, be navigating and tackling this uniquely challenging situation? Because I suppose any challenging situation entails both risks and also opportunities. What are those opportunities for Britain to be actively involved? And contribute positively to the fate of Ukraine?
It's a very, very good question indeed. There are risks and opportunities. Risks, I think we know. It's very good that you are focusing on the opportunities. Risks, we know, and I think we saw them escalating over the last 3 years. In terms of opportunities, I think the question is bifold. So first of all, opportunities on the side of the UK and the EU generally, and opportunities on the side of the Ukraine, because there is the other part of the deal, of course, which is Ukraine. In terms of what countries would want from Ukraine, I think we had a prime from the United States, the famous agreement that should be finalized this week, and that is an agreement on the so-called rare earth exploration and exploitation in Ukraine that the United States wanted very much, that President Trump wanted very much. There is also an agreement similar to that one, which was discussed with the European Union. So in terms of what the interest is there, an interest beyond that economic space, that is a big question. In the case of the United States, from what I've seen today, very clearly the Ukrainian party said that the signature of that deal will be only going forward if security guarantees are actually included in the deal. On the side of the European Union and Britain, the opportunities would be, first of all, to have a trace, so not to have an active hot war in the territory of the European Union. The second part of that would be to arrive at an agreement with Russia and Ukraine. And finally, probably to agree to a peace treaty and to a longer peace situation. Probably if that would be achieved, the opportunity for the EU would be an accession of Ukraine to the EU and an access to Ukraine workforce, market, resources. And on the side of the United Kingdom, a possibility to actually bridge up its European defense strategy, because there is space to act. As we know, UK has left the European Union, but this new European Defence Common Project offers a great opportunity for UK to be part of the European family and to be a primary member of that European family, for the simple reason that there are only 2 nuclear powers in Europe, if we exclude Russia, of course, and that would be France and the United Kingdom. And in that strategic game, clearly the UK can position itself high on defense, therefore a privileged partner for EU member states on all the other subjects today, as defense takes precedence, as we see it.
And about that minerals deal, how will US navigate the jurisdictional issue there? Because as we understand, the substantial majority of those resources are actually under Russia-controlled parts of Ukraine. How will the jurisdictional issue be addressed?
This is probably a key to the deal. This is why the Ukrainian party was very clearly mentioning that this deal is only going to be signed if security guarantees are offered for the territories where the exploitation will take place. So I think very much Ukraine sees those territories as part of Ukraine. I think Russia, in 4 cases, clearly voted those territories as part of Russia. So there is a dispute there. And it's very interesting how the US delegation negotiated the access to those minerals with Ukraine without discussing them with Russia. Now that is in the public space. Nobody told us that the discussion happened in between Russia and the United States, but let's not forget that there were a number of meetings happening in between Russia and the United States. So maybe that topic was already discussed, or if not, will be discussed soon, and an agreement will be found. So what we know at this point in time is that Ukraine insists on having the security warranties on those territories, which Ukraine sees as part of its territory and of its national state.
Back to the Trump-Starmer meeting. We know that increasing one's defense capabilities comes with a hefty price, and Starmer's announcement that the UK will cut foreign aid in order to fund more defense spending, many believe is a very smart move, in particular on the eve of this particular trip. And there are those who actually say that Starmer has put Britain on a war footing ahead of key Trump meeting. Do you think this defense spending story will help Starmer tomorrow?
I think as an image it does help. Clearly President Trump wants more spending on defense. Now going 2.3 to 2.5 is something for sure, but it's not. It's far from what probably President Trump would want to hear, which would probably be more around 4 or 5 percent. So clearly it's a good step in the way that it shows that what didn't happen for many years does happen now. So an increase in the defense spending. At the same time, it cuts spending on foreign aid. It follows a bit the track of what President Trump did in the United States or the USA. But the bigger question in the mid to long term, and actually not so mid-term, actually short, mid, long term, would be to see to what extent cutting all the external aid, both at the United States end and at the United Kingdom end, would result or could result in a migration crisis. Because cutting all that aid means that quite a number of countries in the world will find themselves in a very dear situation. And dear situations typically result in higher migration rates. Or both President Trump and Prime Minister Starmer have very clear commitments on maintaining migration at as low levels as possible. And that is not very easy to achieve while cutting at the same time external aid.
And what is the degree of coordination between Britain and the United States about the subject involving Ukraine and Russia? Because President Trump's team now talks about normalization with Russia. Even there has been some talk about lifting of sanctions against Russia. Whereas Keir Starmer recently stated that the West must increase the pressure even further on Russia. And also Britain announced that they would impose a new round of sanctions on Russia. So the question about the coordination, is it planned like this, or does it stem from the lack of coordination?
I think it does. I think it is more the latter. So it doesn't seem as a coordinated effort. So at the same time, the EU has voted a new package of sanctions, which will enter into force soon. The United Kingdom voted the new package of sanctions indeed, which is a tougher way to look at Russia and to look at the Russian business. And at the same time, the United States seems to point towards getting basically sanctions, if not relief of sanctions, at least relief of some sanctions. And I think this shows two things. Indeed, non-coordination, the coordination was the rule under the Biden administration, doesn't seem to be anymore the case. And the second thing that this shows is basically that the United States are in a negotiation. And in a negotiation, you probably want to offer something to get something in return. While the United Kingdom and France and generally the European Union were not in a negotiation. They were in a situation in which they considered, and they continue to consider, Russia as the aggressor, Ukraine as the defender, and then clearly put as much pressure on Russia as possible. I think also UK and France and the European Union more generally, not just France, saw that the fiscal space that President Putin had after those 3 years of heavy investments in defense, that fiscal space became very thin indeed, as well as the reserves, which could be used, further used for this war, which is a high-intensity war. It's a very expensive war. So they were in a position to increase sanctions, to diminish that fiscal space to the minimum possible, and to diminish reserves of Russia. So probably their strategy was, if you don't have enough money, if you're lacking money and funds, then what will happen is that you will be forced to the, into a position to dialogue and to have a peace deal, because you cannot simply afford that war. while the United States start, I think, from the opposite position, which is let's finish this war at all costs. And let's get the maximum out of it, probably in terms of possible deals with Ukraine and possible deals with Russia.
We all know that Donald Trump is an extraordinary politician, very different to other politicians, very different to his predecessors. And some people are saying that Prime Minister Starmer may need to play his, what they call it, a royal trump card for difficult White House talks. I mean, it's not a sort of a question requiring analysis, I suppose, but it's more like a question which is centered around the instinct. Could the prospect of a royal visit help the Prime Minister's cause?
I think this is something that Prime Minister Starmer could offer and what President Macron could not offer. At the moment of the beginning of the relations in between United Kingdom, what was there, Great Britain and France and the United States, by the formation of the United States, there were two kingdoms. Now there is only one kingdom left, so a royal visit is a possibility. I think President Macron did what he could do, including inviting President Trump to the inauguration of Notre Dame in Paris, to a number of very dedicated visits there. But I think for President Trump, the imagery of this royal visit would be very important indeed. I think he would probably very much like this possibility to be there with the king and maybe to feel, king for a day. So probably that would help the relations. But the question is for how long? Such a visit, takes some months to organize and takes some days to forget. So probably it's a good tool, but not a long-term tool.
Thank you very much, Vlad. So grateful to you for your answers and for your time. Thank you.
You are very welcome. Thank you indeed.
Thank you. This was Vlad Altian, political analyst from Brussels, Belgium. We discussed the special relationship and the prospective trip of the UK Prime Minister to the United States and its possible implications. See you very soon indeed.